So now in the introductory session, we can see 4 different components: letter of transmittal, GFOA certificates if the government has earned it, organizational chart, and list of elected and appointed officials. In this letter of transmittal, it communicates useful information about your government entities and provides additional insight for its citizens. It is like an executive summary of the government's financial activities and conditions. So the first part of this letter really starts talking about the entity has fulfilled the legal requirements for publishing the CAFR. Then it talks about the management's responsibility for the information in the report and how it maintains internal control. And also mentioned an auditor's report has been issued to provide assurance that the information is reliable. And following the auditor's report, the management's discussion and analysis will be provided for additional information. Now, the second section in the letter will talk about profile of the government. For example, it will include information such as when the entity was established, what type of services it provides for its citizens, the populations of the government, as well as the budgets adopted for that fiscal year. The third section provides information on the local economy, information associated with a government's long-term financial planning, financial policies that affect the financial position in the current year, or if there's any major initiatives that are expected to affect future financial position, etc. The last session will talk about the awards and acknowledgments. Here, it acknowledges if a certificate of achievement is awarded by GFOA and all the effort that went into completion of this report. And finally, and most importantly, this letter must be signed by the financial officers of the entity. Now here is an example of the certificate of achievement for the Excellence Financial Reporting awarded by GFOA if a government entity has prepared the report that meets GFOA reporting standards. So this is a checklist on the right-hand side GFOA uses to grade the CAFR. Now, as we can see, it has a list of questions for each session. In this session for the letter of transmittal we just went through, it was looking at the format of the letter, the date of the letter, is it signed, does it include the background of the government, does it contain information designed to assist users in assessing the government's economic conditions. Government entities whose CAFRs meet these reporting standards, which are based on the GAAP requirements set by GASB, and additional information required by GFOA would be awarded with this certificate. You may also notice on the date of the certificate is for the previous year, as the government entity can only earn a certificate after the CAFR is completed and submitted for review. So the next two items, organizational chart and a list of officials, are additional information that the management would like to present to its users or citizens. So now we have just reviewed the introductory session of a CAFR. We have seen the required elements in the letter of transmittal, GFOA checklist to help the government entities prepare their report to the high standards set forth by GFOA. So now let's take a look at the financial section of the CAFR. So GASB requires that this session includes at least auditor's report, management's discussion and analysis, basic financial statements, required supplementary information, and the last item, combining statements and individual fund financial statements and schedules. So these are not on the is not on the required list, but it provides important information to support the financial statements. So auditor's report is always the first item on the financial statements, although it's not required to be the first. So here we basically want to know if the audit was conducted in accordance with auditing standards in the U.S., if the financial statements has been prepared fairly in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S., did the auditors express an unmodified opinion on the fair presentation of the basic financial statements. The MD&A, GASB 34 talks about MD&A should introduce the basic financial statements and provide an analytical overview of the government's financial activities. Although it is just requires supplementary information, the governments are required to present MD&A before the basic financial statements. So it offers and condensed financial data extracted from all the statements and focus on how these fund financial statements reinforce information in the government-wide financial statements or provide additional information. So the basic financial statements consist of 3 components, and we will look at each one of them in more detail later. The first one is the government-wide financial statements. They are designed to provide readers with a broad view of a government entity's finances in a manner similar to a private sector business. So government-wide financial statements has 2 statements, statement of net position, statement of activities. They are prepared using economic resources measurement focus and accrual accounting basis, and these statements should report all of the assets, liabilities, revenues, expenses, and gains and losses of the government. And each statement should report the governmental and business type activities of a primary government, along with the component unit, if there's any, reported in the separate column. Fiduciary activities, however, since their resources are not available to finance government's program, it should be excluded from the government-wide statements. Next, the fund financial statement. The state and local government use fund accounting to ensure and demonstrate a compliance with finance-related legal requirements. So all of the funds in most government entities can be divided into 3 categories: governmental funds, proprietary funds, and fiduciary funds. So what is a fund? A fund is a grouping of related accounts that is used to maintain control over resources that have been segregated for specific activities or objectives. For instance, a lunch program, reading program, or public safety projects, so that we can easily account for its revenue sources and spending. So according to GASB 34, governmental fund financial statements should be prepared using current financial resources measurement focus and modify accrual basis of counting. So we will talk about these terms later. Proprietary funds financial statements and fiduciary funds financial statements, and these are to be prepared using economic resources measurement focus and accrual basis of counting. So these fund financial statements provide reader with information about government entities' most significant funds, not as a whole. So let's talk about measurement focus. As we have seen, there are 2 different measurement focus used in these financial statements. The first one is the economic resources management focus. It is where a financial statement report all of the entity's resources, that is inflows, outflows, short terms, long terms, everything are recorded. This focus is used for government-wide financial statements, proprietary fiduciary funds financial statements. The second one is the current financial resources measurement focus. And this is where a financial statement reports only an entity's short-term or current financial resources. And this focus is unique to the state and local government financial reporting and is used to report governmental funds. And again, we will talk about these fund category and examine each of these financial statements in more detail later. Now, at the end of financial session, GASB requires a note to the financial statements. And it says notes to the financial statements consist of notes that provide information that is essential to a user's understanding of the basic financial statements. So basically, it will talk about significant accounting policy used, measurement focus and basis of accounting, any budgetary information, presentation of the financial statements, if any reconciliation between the financial statements, and also talk about capital assets, if any risk management, etc. The next section is required supplementary information. GASB 60A requires employers to present more extensive note disclosure and require supplementary information. This includes disclosing descriptive information about the type of benefit plans provide and how contribution to the pension plans are determined, and if there's any assumptions or methods used to calculate these pension liability. So some government entities provide supporting schedules that present the detailed information for the columns in the financial statements that include multiple funds. As you will see in the financial statements later, there will be a column for a total non-major funds. These combining statements show the non-major funds individually and grouped by the type of funds, as you can see in the screenshot. It explains what the special revenue funds are and lists the funds belong to these categories. So for instance, here you can see the library funds, housing grant fund, any block grants, and public safety grant. And all these were followed by the combined statements of these non-major funds.